So here it is, new year, and that means changes to taxes and pensions, lots to take in, far too much for us to be able to understand. So we count on our associate, our friend, Harvey Bienenstock is a Montreal CPA, and yesterday we talked about CEBA loans because, and I didn't know this until we actually spoke to Harvey, today we find out the Prime Minister made it official. He's in town. Justin Trudeau said the CEBA loan deadline will not be extended, period. However, as we found out yesterday in speaking to Harvey, that doesn't mean that if you're a small business and you can't pay the loan back, that you're necessarily out of luck because there are other provisions for you, and the government has made those available as well. But if you don't know about them, you should ask about them and find out because it doesn't mean you will be closed down if you can't pay it back on time. But today I thought we'd focus on individuals, not on businesses. So Harvey is back on the line. Harvey, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, guys.
Let me begin by asking about pensions because there are some changes there. So let's start with that. What should people know?
Well, if you're an employee or self-employed, you're obligated to contribute to the Quebec pension plan or the Canada pension plan, etc. And these rates keep going up, and the amount that's covered keeps going up. So the rate for 2024 is basically a 5.4% that you pay, 5.4% that your boss pays. Then they've added an enhanced one where they added another 1% for each of you. So really, you're paying 12.8% on your income into the Quebec pension plan for you and your employer. And that goes in so that you'll qualify for a pension when you come out. But the most egregious aspect of this is that on your paycheck, you are forced to pay into the unemployment insurance plan, into the Quebec parental leave plan, and into the Quebec pension plan. And whatever you pay in, on the federal return, you get 12.5% credit, no matter what you're going to be paying when you get it out. And in Quebec, you get no credit. So you have no relief on your Quebec tax return for any of your payroll taxes, which I find very egregious.
Okay.
Now, when you, but the good news is that in 2024, the government of Quebec, which used to force everybody to keep contributing into the pension plan even after they started collecting, and if you want to keep working after you're 65, you were forced to keep putting money in. And just as an example, if you were to put in the maximum this year, which is about $8,700 for you and your employer's contribution, your pension will go up when you collect it by $406 a year. So for $8,700, you get $400. And that's basically now. But the good news is if you're collecting a pension at 65, the government says that you don't have to pay in anymore. And we were the only province where you were forced to keep paying even after you were even after you started collecting. So if you are 65 and you are collecting a pension, you can ask that you not put any more money into the Quebec pension plan. I believe they did that because they wanted to ask retirees to come back into the workforce, and who in their right mind would do that if you're going to pay taxes and additional pension contributions and clawback, et cetera, et cetera. So I think Quebec kind of got wise and said, if we want people to come back, we've got to eliminate this pension contribution. So if you are collecting a pension, if you are not collecting a pension and you keep working, you should start getting one. Otherwise, you're going to keep paying in for not much benefit. You can start collecting a pension at age 60. But if you are before 65, you're still going to be forced to put in until you're 65. Then you can ask to be exempted. And it automatically stops in the year that you turn 73. So if you're going to turn 73 in 2024, you don't even have to ask. Your payroll department will eliminate the pension contribution. So that's pensions as in a nutshell.
How long can you continue to receive those pensions?
You receive it until you die, and then your spouse will get a spousal, as you're aware.
Right.
Spouse will benefit about 60% of what you were getting, unless she's getting the maximum pension, in which it doesn't happen. Okay.
Let me turn to something else. I'm not sure how this works or what this changes or whether this is just federal. The alternative minimum tax, does that change this year?
Yes, it did, because the minimum tax is something which only high-income people pay, but it's a cosmetic. It's where people who have a high gross income but take advantage of the government-offered deductions like an RRSP or charitable donations or investment in resource industries, which is encouraged. If you take those deductions so your income, your taxable income is low, if you looked at your taxable income compared to your gross income and you pay low tax, it was embarrassing for the government. So they force you to pay what's called a minimum tax, which is around 20.5% on the feds. They raised it from 14. Quebec has always had it. So if your income is over $173,000, I mean, let's be honest, it's a high number. Mm-hmm. But if you are going to have that kind of income and they're denied the deductions, if you would not be paying a regular tax, they're forcing you to pay the minimum tax.
Okay.
And that becomes creditable in future years when it flips and your actual tax is more than the minimum. But what it does is it discourages people or high-income earners who basically fund a lot of things from investing in resource industries like oil and gas or mineral exploration or RSPs or give shares in public companies as donations. You have a higher inclusion rate. So this minimum tax affects only lowly high-income people, but it will have an effect on what investment decisions they make.
Okay. I would ask one more thing just quickly, and then you can get to throw in a couple. Changes in terms of minimums that you earn or percentages coming down based on how much you earn in Quebec?
You mean like the tax rate?
Yeah.
Well, they eliminated it for the low-income people, which is, they gave a 1% credit.
Right.
But you got to remember that in the Feds, you hit the maximum tax rate for Ottawa, at $246,000. So Ottawa considers you to be the high income earner at $246. Quebec considers you to be an ultra high income earner at $118. So there's a big discrepancy in what the government think you are a high-income person. And the combined tax rate, because you had a previous segment about how the rich don't pay, the income tax rate in Quebec is about 53.4%. So when you are a high-income earner, when you drag your butt out of bed every morning and go to work and you realize that the government's going to keep more of the money than you get to keep, it becomes kind of a disincentive.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't know there was that big a discrepancy between what's considered high earner in Quebec and high earner federally.
That's Quebec does a lot of things to you that you're not aware of, including denying the deduction.
Wow.
The high-income earners are zapped. For example, the feds increased the basic personal exemption, which is basically how much you're allowed to make before you start paying tax. So they increase it by $1,549, so that instead of like $14,000, you're allowed $15,700, unless you're a high-income earner, and then they start clawing it back. So if you're making a lot of money, you don't get these $15,700, you're down to like $14,100. So they're really looking at high-income earners as the goose. And as Colbert said, in France in 1700, assessing taxes is the art of plucking the goose to extract the maximum amount of feathers with the least amount of hissing. So if you don't know how many feathers they're extracting and you're not hissing, then basically you're basically up to the vagaries of the government.
Yeah, I mean, you're making me want to check things out in more detail for sure. I'm also just wondering, you touched on what we asked at 2:15 today as our first question of the day about super taxing the super rich. What's your quick take on that, Harvey?
Well, my take is that the super rich have earned their money, and they paid 53% to get there. Okay, now the question is, how much more of their money do you want to take to make it, quote, fair? And the governments are funding a lot of programs for people who are low income. The feds just introduced, the child care last year. They introduced, the dental plan. Yeah. Now they're talking about the pharmacare. So all these plans got to get funded, and they got to go to the high income earners to pay them or fund it with deficits. So my take is that, assess a fair rate, but don't make it a disincentive. And so that the people who generate the wealth and who do pay more than half of it away should be left with something to keep on generating the wealth. Now, if you think that's unfair, well, that's what created Russia to collapse, where you basically took a lot of money and there was no incentive for people to work hard.
Interesting take. We should have done this earlier on. Harvey, it's always great talking to you. Appreciate you breaking everything down for us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Harvey Bienenstock, Montreal CPA. So, a couple of changes there. That pension thing is interesting, right?
I'll say.
That you get to 65, and we've heard the government say this. They want more retirees to come back into the system. We know there's a labor shortage to work, so they're providing a bit of an incentive as far as those payments are concerned. That's good news.
You can opt out.
Yeah.